Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nashville Public Television's Finding Your Roots Season 7 virtual screening and panel discussion. I'm your moderator for today, and my name is Brigette Jones. I'm the curator of social history at the Tennessee State Museum, and I'm also the founding manager of Bridge Builders Historical Consulting. Now, today we're going to be learning how you can start your own genealogy, and we're going to figure out how to take a deeper look at how to approach historical hurdles like that of enslaved ancestors when researching your own family history. For this discussion, I am joined by an illustrious panel. First up is someone I like to call friend. Her name is Taneya Koonce. She's the president of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society of Nashville. And a little about Taneya. She's an enthusiastic genealogist with a long-standing passion for exploring family history and more than 20 years of professional expertise in information science, research, and information organization. Taneya volunteers extensively in the genealogy community with current leadership roles in the Nashville chapter of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society, the U.S. Gen Web Project, and the National Genealogical Society. Thank you so much, Taneya, for being here today.
Oh, I'm delighted.
Yay! Next up is a brilliant mind as well. This is Nick Sheedy. Nick Sheedy is a lead genealogist for the show that we're talking about, Finding Your Roots. Nick Sheedy is not only just the lead genealogist for the PBS television show, he also works with Dr. Henry Louis Gates very closely. He has more than 25 years of genealogical research experience and was mentored by his dear friend, the late Johnny Kearney, who was one of, I'm sorry?
Johnny
Cerny, thank you so much, who is one of the leading experts on African American genealogy. Since coming on board during season 2, he has conducted extensive research for numerous guests who come from extremely diverse backgrounds. And as the lead genealogist since March 2020, Nick works with an amazing team of genealogists, historians, researchers, and producers to create one of the most popular shows on public television. Finding Your Roots is currently in production for season 8, so make sure y'all turn in when it comes out. Last but certainly not least is another very brilliant mind. His name is Daniel Sharfstein. Now, he is the Dick and Martha Lanson Chair in Law at Vanderbilt University. His scholarship focuses on the legal history of race and citizenship in the United States. He has many accolades. Here's a few. He's received a 2013 Guggenheim Fellowship to research his book on post-Reconstruction America, Thunder in the Mountains, Chief Joseph Oliver Otis and Howard, and the Nez Pierce War. His book, The Invisible Line, Three American Families and the Secret Journey from Black to White, won the 2012 J. Anthony Lucas Book Prize for Excellence in Nonfiction, as well as the Law and Society Association's 2012 James Willard Hirsch Jr. Prize for Socio-Legal History, the William Nelson Cromwell Book Prize for the American Society of Legal History, and the Chancellor's Award for Research from Vanderbilt. Do you have any more accolades? I need to be like you a little bit more. But thank you all so much for being here today. We're super excited. All right. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that was amazing to me. I was very
Yes.
intrigued by the relationship between Angela Bassett. I'm a huge Angela Bassett fan. I watched her episode of this show, so it was welcomed for me.
Mm-hmm.
But welcome back, everyone. I hope that you enjoyed the clip. We're going to go ahead and jump on into our discussion. And if you all have questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we will get to them a little bit later on in our talk. Now, my first question is going to be targeted on a local level. Miss Taneya, can you describe the importance of being able to find your roots for Black Americans?
Yes. Yes. And I think we saw that in the clips that we've just seen, right? When people are sharing their reactions to learning this information about their family, they're very relatable interactions or reactions. So we heard one guest saying it's life affirming, right? To find out this information about her family that she did not know. One of the guests said it makes me feel stronger. And I like that quote because it goes towards a sense of really understanding what your ancestors have gone through. For persons of color in this country, individuals descended from, those who have been enslaved, think about the impact it has to be able to reconstruct families that were purposely deconstructed, right? So being able to put those pieces back together again, to have that sense of identity from learning about your ancestors, their characteristics, their traits. You may see some of those same traits exhibited in your own current family members today. I mean, it is just an incredible feeling. And I'm so happy for everyone who gets to experience that. So to answer your question, the importance of it is that sense of connection, that sense of identity, the sense of really validating who you are, who you come from, and being proud of your ancestors.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think for those of us who are descended from enslaved peoples, I think there is a sense of pride for those of us who have went on to be successful beyond what originally was set forth for us. So I love the genealogy perspective. I think that we definitely should dig a little bit deeper and see exactly where do we come from. And if you
Right,
can go back even farther before the plantation, that would be
right,
beautiful. Mhm.
right, exactly.
Now, Mr. Nick, you are another one of our experts. Can you describe some of the issues your research team ran into while conducting the research for your show participants? I'm
Oh,
sure there were some issues.
it runs the gamut. We've had guests who don't know who one of their parents is. You know, they have an unknown father, all the way up to, we have a guest we're working on right now that the pedigree looks like he might descend from Pocahontas. He's has an enormous family tree, and it's just overwhelming to try to document all those lines back 400 years. But for our African American research, for the most part, 1870 forward, we have the same record groups for everybody: the U.S. censuses, marriage records, death records, birth records. We look for obituaries. We also reach out to the guests' families and ask for family lore and stories. We send a questionnaire to the guest: what do you know? But really, once you get back to the 1870 census, that's usually the first public record we'll find listing formerly enslaved people by name and age, and where you actually start profiling people who were born in slavery. And so that's the big hurdle for us, especially with African American research, is to then try to take it back further. And the difficulty there is sometimes it's just happenstance. What does that family constellation look like in 1870? If you happen to have a young person, 18 years old, 20 years old, they're on their own, they're not married yet, they have no children, they're not living with their parents anymore, it's often very, very difficult, if not impossible, to connect them to their parents because there's just no records that do that. Occasionally, way further in the future, a death certificate might name their parents. But what we hope to do to get into the slave research is that in 1870, you have a whole family group, a mother, a father, a bunch of kids, grandma and grandpa living next door. Now we have a family group that we can profile, that whole family group. And you jump back into pre-Civil War records. You're looking at the slave schedules in 1860, 1850. You're looking for slave holders that held slaves that fit this family that you've just profiled. The slave schedules don't name anybody, any slaves by name. You just get ages, genders, and color. But you're looking for that family constellation. And so if you have their ages and boys and girls in a family group, you can profile the family, look at the 1860 slave schedule, look at the 1850 slave schedule, and take the surname that people adopted after emancipation and start looking for potential slave owners. But the record group that's most important to us when we get into the slave era research are probate records. Those are almost always county level court records. If a slave owner died, even if he didn't leave a will, you're almost always going to find an inventory of his estate. And a will might name slaves by name, but sometimes they don't give ages. Often they'll give relationships like child of, it'll list a mother and her children. But the probate records, the state inventories will list every single slave by name, usually by age, often in a family group. So you can see these are the parents, these are the children, they're together, or list mother with children, say Suki with, and then list 4 children after her. And it'll give the value assigned to those slaves. That's a dollar amount, what they were worth. And that tells you a little bit something, a little bit about them too. But again, it can be hit and miss because maybe the slave owner didn't die before the emancipation. Maybe he lived till the 1870s, 80s, after 1900. If the slave owner didn't leave a will, he survives the Civil War, maybe you're out of luck. Maybe he inherited those slaves from his father back in the 1820s, and there's just too far of a spread. So a lot of stars have to align for us to be able to delve into the slave research. And I would estimate that we're probably only successful maybe 20% of the time to positively identify slave holders. And even when we do that, we're sometimes only able to scratch out one, maybe two generations back into slavery. And we just get names, sometimes estimated birth dates, usually no death information. We just know that somebody didn't survive past the Civil War. But that's the biggest hurdle for us with African-American research. That's the difficulty. And then there's always the chance that the courthouse burned down and those records just don't exist.
Yeah.
And so, especially in Georgia and a few other states, you have Virginia as well, lots and lots of courthouse fires, lots of record losses, and that just creates a black hole that you can't get around. The other record group that I will mention is the Freedmen's Bureau records. Those have largely been digitized now. You can find a lot of them digitized at Family Search and at Ancestry. They can be a gold mine, but they haven't been fully indexed. So you end up flipping through page by page, looking for your people. The probate records also have not been every name indexed. And so you have to get into the original records and just thumb through them page by page. There are efforts to do every name indexes. And when that happens, that'll be an enormous help to African-American research. But those are some of the hurdles that we try to overcome when we do this research.
Thank you for that. I figured that there were some issues dealing with, especially the history of people who are notable celebrities. You feel the need to kind of make sure you get all their information right, but sometimes that's not always the case, I can believe. Now, Daniel, you have a very interesting project going on that you were describing for me a couple of weeks back on our introductory call. Could you explain what your mapping project is designed to do for Black Middle Tennesseans?
Sure. So with a number of colleagues and students, we are mapping every point in the city of Nashville that we can link to an identifiable enslaved man, woman, or child. And we're thinking of it as a visual index of the experience of slavery in the city and its many forms. And so, we're thinking about how useful, in what ways a resource like this can be useful. And one thing we're doing is we're asking people in the community, if you had a resource like this, how would you use it? And we're thinking about it as something that is searchable by name, searchable by particular topics, searchable by archival sources. It's something that, if you click on a point, you can see the source and see those primary resources. We're thinking of it as something that if you're ideally, if you're walking around the city of Nashville, you can see what's nearby and gain access to more stories. So part of that is, it's a genealogical tool, but it's also in our view, a new way of seeing the city, particularly as the landscape, just gets more and more paved over, and every neighborhood in the city is gentrifying at the same time.
I agree. I'm glad you brought gentrification into the conversation. It definitely wipes out a lot of history for a lot of Black Americans and other people who come from poverty-stricken backgrounds, a lot of those communities have been historically poverty-stricken. So when you take away those communities, you definitely leave a lasting impact on the genealogical history of the communities that inhabit. Now, with that being said, since you guys are an accomplished group of researchers and genealogists, uh, do you consider genealogy a privilege, and why? I certainly do, but I'm interested to hear your perspectives.
Well, I'm happy to start. Yes, genealogy is a privilege. And, we see that come up time after time because there are many reasons why people may not have the ability to do this research or may have challenges in trying to get started. Nick, for example, was talking about how people don't know a parent or maybe don't know a grandparent. What if you've been adopted? What if you find out you have misattributed parentage, right? So you're now trying to figure out your ancestry going back for people you don't know. There's also situations where you may have trauma in the family, so no one discusses it. And if you try to start engaging in those conversations, it opens wounds that people may not be ready to, embark on. So that can cut off your ability to have those conversations with your family. Then there's a matter of, resources, right? We fortunately have a lot that is available for free, but then there's a lot that can be very difficult to get to. Take, money to be able to hire someone to access records for you. So it very much is a privilege, although we are trying to, and I think we all are trying to make it even more accessible, as accessible as we can, so that we can at least try to contribute to reducing some of those barriers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Anybody else want to get in on that question?
Yeah, I could chime in on that. With the accessibility of records, more and more are coming online all of the time.
Mhm.
But as Daniel and I were discussing a little bit before we started, there's a lot of records out there that have not only never been digitized, but probably aren't even microfilmed. For instance, when we were doing the research for Clint Black, we had to get some probate records from Jackson County, Georgia. Family History Library did not have them. They weren't on microfilm. I assumed that there was a record loss, but we called up the county courthouse and they said, "Oh no, they're here. They're in the vault. They're downstairs somewhere on a shelf." And we had to get a local researcher to go look them up. And same with Roseanne Cash. What allowed us to tie the connect all the dots for her Shields family, her mixed race family, were court records in Polk County, Texas. And again, we had to send somebody to the county courthouse. And originally we called up and talked to an assistant clerk who didn't know what they were talking about. They said, "Oh no, we don't have those. You need to call the state." I'm like, "They're there. We need to call back." So we found somebody who knew what they were doing. They had to go to the county courthouse in person, and they knew where to look for these old court records. And so Daniel was talking before about in his research that there were some old court records that probably hadn't been accessed for decades because the cupboards that they were in had even been painted over and they had to be chiseled open. So some of these records are there, but they're not accessible. And so with more and more records being digitized, that's fantastic. But if they've never been microfilmed, it's going to be harder to get them digitized even. And so, there's enormous work to do to make records that exist more accessible to people.
I agree. Daniel, you have anything for that question?
Sure. To have the time to go somewhere far away, have the the time to hang around a place and see what kind of resources kind of appear. For me, it was doing research in Vicksburg, Mississippi, where after a couple of days, I was directed across the street to the attic of the courthouse. Or my colleague Kimberly Welch, she is the person who did these heroic feats of research, where she was going from court to courthouse for her amazing book about Black litigants in the antebellum South. Cutting the paint and freeing these cabinets that probably had been painted over 80 years before. And I found as I did this research, and it took time and it took resources, often as I was meeting descendants, I found that I had all kinds of things that even descendants who had been very actively researching their family genealogies, I had things that they didn't have. So I found that I was often sharing and connecting descendants, just because I had the time and also the resources to find what's hard to find.
Right, right. For those of you who have never done any type of genealogy before, it is time consuming. It is extremely time consuming.
Yes.
So be prepared for that as you jump in. Now I'm going to go into our last question. How can Black people start looking to, well, how can Black people looking to start their genealogy overcome the hurdles presented by the lack of documentation for Black people historically? There are definitely some tricks of the trade here. I know a few, but I'm going to let the panel speak. Anybody want to start us off?
I'll jump in on that one. Talk to your relatives, talk to your older relatives. You know, learn what they know. Sometimes there's family secrets people don't want to talk about. Well, you know, butter somebody up, get them to talk about something. But after you've talked to your relatives, if you have parents, grandparents living, great aunts, great uncles, somebody, older cousins even, that might remember something that you never learned. Get as much information as you can. Then you have to remember the most recent census we have right now is the 1940 census. The 1950 census won't come out for another year. So you have to have enough information to get back to the 1940 census. But then from there, you can get marriage records, birth, death records, and then you go back to the 1930 census, 1910 census, and you can profile people, and then you have enough to go back. But then you just have to kind of familiarize yourself with the record groups that are available to us, and especially what's online and what's free, and then just kind of take advantage of that. And where to look for the records is also important. But those are the places where you need to start. So start with what is known, and then you go into the unknown.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to take that before we move into Q&A?
And test your DNA. Test your DNA. That's one thing we haven't touched on much yet.
Yeah.
DNA can often help us connect dots that you might never ever connect with the paper trail, especially once you get back to the slave era. The paper trail may not exist, but the DNA might help you connect dots that you'd never ever connect otherwise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to take that one?
I'd like to add to that by just saying, one of the things we can do to overcome hurdles of documentation, right? There'll be hurdles from the past, but we can take also active steps to overcome hurdles today. So I always advocate people document what you were finding and get it out there in the universe so that your descendants don't have some of those same hurdles as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to pivot a little bit here because we have a ton of questions coming into our chat box.
Yeah.
And the first question isn't a question, it's a comment. And I love this idea. It comes from Miss Linda. She says that the show could have a lottery of sorts and have one regular, non-famous person as a subject. I'm sure the lives examined would be just as fascinated because we all have a story. Is that something that y'all have talked about at all, Nick?
That has been, I'd say that comment has been made numerous times over the last few years. And when Dr. Gates hosted African American Lives 1 and 2, I believe they did something like that. There was a lottery system, and they did. We have discussed it, and there's talk about doing something like that for finding your roots. It's just a matter of logistics and how to make that happen. But yes, we're aware that a lot of guests are interested in that, and there is discussion about it.
I love it. I will definitely tune in as well when y'all begin that part of the show. Our next question comes from Mark. He says, can African American DNA illuminate African country or tribe of origin? It can? Okay.
It can give insight, right? Although it's important to realize that with all the DNA tests, they're estimates. It's not going to be exact, but they can give you insight into where your ancestral, connections are coming from. But yeah, it definitely gives you a lot of insight. And I know another person asked about how much does it open up the genealogy process. It opens it up a lot.
I can believe that. I know if something that I've considered is definitely doing the DNA testing, because I've pretty much gotten back as far as I can go with my own expertise. At this point, I think I need a little bit of help from science to take me back a little bit farther. And science is not my thing, which is why I'm a historian. So I'm gonna let the genealogists, the real ones, do the good work. Now,
one thing too with your DNA, for African Americans testing DNA, what you hope to find is matching DNA with somebody who's never left Africa. Yeah, you can use these estimates that 23andMe or Ancestry or MyHeritage or Family Tree DNA have, you know, with their reference populations. But when you actually match some DNA with somebody living in Africa, you know you're related to that person. And so for, you know, some of my Black friends, even Black cousins who have done that, they traveled back to Africa, they've met these people, you know, that you actually get a personal connection. I'm Facebook friends with some of these folks, and that's really super cool. And my grandma Betty carries a small amount of sub-Saharan African DNA, 2 to 2.5%. I match sub-Saharan African DNA with people who have never left Africa.
oh my
And
gosh.
so I know that my ancestors, those African ancestors, probably came from Ghana and are related somehow to the Ashanti family or the Ashanti tribe. So yeah, it can establish a connection that you know for sure. That's cool, you know, and something you'd never ever find in the paper.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's something that's definitely on my to-do list. Now, someone wants to know, I'm assuming that they mean Nick. They said, is Dr. Newly based here locally in Nashville? Nick, you want to tell them about where you are?
Ask where I am physically?
Yeah, they want to know if you're local to Nashville.
Oh, I'm not local to Nashville. I currently reside in the Flathead Valley in Montana, but for the past 8 years, we were in Salt Lake City, where a lot of genealogists are based in the Salt Lake area, because that's where the family history library is located. But with so many records becoming available online, I could do this work most anywhere. And we have staff at the library to do our lookups for us once it reopens. It's been closed for the past year. And so I'm physically in Montana. Most of our production team is in the New York City area, although they have also been working from home. Our associate genealogist, Kimberly Morgan, is in Beaufort, South Carolina. And then, of course, if we need to access records that we don't have available to us easily online, we contact and collaborate with local researchers all over the world. And then Dr. Gates, of course, is in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So our team, the Finding Your Roots team, is spread out. But we collaborate that way. But I will say, although I'm not in Nashville, I do have roots in Tennessee. I have, through my grandma Betty, I have ancestors who came out of the Bristol area, Sullivan County, the far eastern corner of Tennessee. That country in the late 1700s. And it's through them that I have some Melungeon ancestry. I match a lot of DNA with descendants of known Melungeon communities from North Carolina and Hawkins County, Tennessee. So I do have some roots in Tennessee, even though I'm not in Nashville.
Perfect. Well, there you go, guys. He's not local to Nashville, but we do have tons of local genealogists here if you're looking to do any type of work with your family. Now, this question comes from Miss Gloria. She wants to know, are researchers paid by the show? That's a great question.
For Finding Your Roots? Yes. I'm a full-time genealogist for Finding Your Roots, and we have one other associate genealogist, Kimberly Morgan. Then we have producers and researchers on staff, and yes, we're all professionals. And then when we hire people to do work locally or foreign research, yes, almost all of those people are professionals that we hire to do a job. Occasionally, we do have somebody who offers to do something for us as a volunteer on a volunteer basis. Usually, those are small favors or small lookups. And then occasionally, we'll engage, say, a local county historical society or genealogical society who has volunteers who do work, but Finding Your Roots will make a donation to their nonprofit, their local nonprofit. We've done that in quite a few instances where a local genealogical society or local genealogist, a genealogical society is, they know the local records like the back of their hand, and we need a few lookups, and they'll suggest a donation to that local nonprofit. So
there we go. Now, this one comes from Tracy. She wants to know, does the show have genealogists available for fee for consultation when advanced searches hit a wall? Can we book your genealogist?
No, Finding Your Roots does not do any for hire private research. I have taken on some private research over the years, and my boss, Johnny Cerny, and I regularly work for private clients as well. But no, Finding Your Roots itself, we're dedicated to working for the show. That consumes 90% of my professional time. People do reach out to Dr. Gates all the time asking that same question, and we try to point people in the right direction when somebody wants to hire a professional genealogist. There's lots of resources. There's a website for the Association of Professional Genealogists. And it really depends where your family came from and what your particular interests are. What are your goals? Who might be best suited or have the expertise to help you? And so, and I'm not an expert in every area. When we need expertise for Swedish research or Korean research or Mexican research, we have our go-to people. Especially our Jewish research in Belarus or Ukraine or Poland, we have experts that we go to help with a lot of that research. Cuba and Spanish research. We've dug into a lot of foreign research lately where we've just had to find somebody in Colombia, someplace where we've never done research before, and find somebody local, and everybody's in the same boat there to find an expert in that field or has that niche, and they'll be far more efficient. But as professionals, it's a fee service, so you have to find somebody and make sure that you have the budget to hire them.
All righty. Now, Taneya and Daniel, are there any local resources that you would like to tell our guests about before we get on out of here today?
Absolutely. So the Nashville chapter of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. So you can look us up, OGS Nashville, Google search, you'll find us, and we can help direct people into resources and ways for them to get started.
And I would say the Nashville Public Library is just an amazing resource, and the Nashville Collection, especially, and the Davidson County Archives are one of the things that really brought me to Nashville, along with Fisk University's Special Collections, Tennessee State Library and Archives. We have a wealth of archival resources.
We do.
And not only help you with the genealogy, but also give you some context about what life in Nashville was like for African Americans at different points in history.
Absolutely.
And as noted, the brand new building, the Tennessee State Library and Archives, opens up to the public today in this new location.
You go check out what your tax dollars are helping to pay for.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we want to thank everyone, our panel, our guests, for making the time to attend today's discussion. Make sure you check out the chat now and tell NPT what you thought about today's Finding Your Roots event. There's a survey in the chat box that we will be uploading here in just a moment, and you can tell us all about your views and opinions. Nashville Public Television would like to thank you for your continued support of their local PBS programming, with a special thanks to NPT's local partnership with none other than the Tennessee State Museum as well. And we want to give a sincere thank you to WETA, W-E-T-A, and sponsor for their grant support of this event. Big thanks to that. Now, Nashville Public Television also invites you to join in on the workshop with Ms. Taneya Koonce next Tuesday. That's going to be April 20th for an in-depth look at objects, heirlooms, and photos, and how you can discover more about your family from those items in your home. Go to wnpt.org/events to sign up. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Please stay safe and take care. Have a good one, y'all.